Okay, it looks like we have a good crowd tonight. I am going to go ahead and start. It is 6 o'clock. Would the clerk call the roll, please? Mary, if you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty.
Okay.
I've lost my screen. So, okay, Taylor.
Here.
Thorsland.
Here.
Tinsley.
Present.
Wolken.
Here.
Young.
Here.
Clemens. Cowart. Dillard Myers.
Here.
Eisenman. Esri.
Present.
Fears. Cortado.
Here.
Goss.
Here.
Harper. Ingram.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Michaels.
Here.
Patterson. Rector. Store.
Present.
Summers.
Here.
Rosales.
Here.
And Mary, I know that Lorraine is trying to get on. I think she lost the link somewhere, so you may be looking for her name to see when she finally joins us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, next is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Mr. Esri, Mr. Rosales, any discussion on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, roll call for the agenda, please.
Taylor.
Yes.
Thorsland.
Yes.
Tinsley.
Yes.
Wolken.
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Clemens.
Yes.
Cowart. She's been able to get in.
It's
Dillard
she's
Myers.
on her phone. It looks like she's on with her phone.
Here. Dillard Myers is here.
Okay. Thank you. Eisenman.
Cowart present.
Thank you. Esri.
Yes.
Fears. Furtado.
Here.
Goss.
Yes.
Ingram.
Yes. Way to go, Stephanie.
McGuire.
Yes.
Michaels.
Yes.
Patterson. Rector. Store.
District 10 is proud to cast one vote in favor of the agenda.
Summers.
Present.
Rosales.
Here, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to just move right into presentations. We're going to use the same format that we used last night. We have several directors and heads of programs here tonight, officials. Tammy's going to go through the slides. However, the first set of slides is going to be given to us by RPC. And then after that, Tammy will do the slides. Please wait till the end of the slides for each department before you ask questions. And I do have the menu up where I can see hands tonight. So thank you again for miking room. And I will be looking at hands for people to ask questions. And again, please try to keep your comments or your questions tonight related to the budget kinds of topics. If we have other kind of questions, we can answer them outside of this meeting at a different time, because you obviously need to know something about the programs to make decisions about the budget. But tonight we're trying to focus on just the finance parts. Okay, RPC is here this evening. Delitzo or Betty, which one of you is going to be presenting this?
It's going to be me.
Okay,
Good evening.
thanks.
Thank you so much to you, Madam Chair, to members of the County Board. I am joined this evening with Betty Murphy, who is our Chief Operating Officer, as well as the Chief Finance Officer for the Regional Planning Commission. We will be presenting to you our proposed FY 2021 agency budget. To begin, we could go to the second slide.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we're on the first slide.
You have control of the slides, Betty, so you can just move them down.
So the total agency budget slide should be up.
It's,
Looks like you guys need to start the presentation. You just
yeah,
have it up
the
as
slideshow.
the PowerPoint document right now. You really need to start the presentation, don't you?
No, we're going to go slide by slide. So
Okay.
Betty, if you go to the left side, you can click on the slide that you want and it'll move it down. There you go.
Yep. Can everybody see that?
It's still the,
It's not moving. Andy, can you help him out?
It's showing up on my screen, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, we see your front slide, but we can't, it's not moving down.
I think she needs to start the PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, you might follow Connie's advice and press F5.
Message I'm getting is that the screen is sharing, so I'm not quite sure what I need to do.
Andy or Tim?
Could you try pressing F5 up at the top of your keyboard?
Sure.
here we go. Okay,
Okay.
all right. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So to begin with, just to give you a little bit of an overview of our total agency proposed budget for FY 2021. Revenues, we are projecting $33,488,191 with expenditures of $32,878,194. This represents a total of full-time equivalency of 355 employees. Our budget accommodates 5 different funds, which I will go into further detail later on. This also includes more than 147 grants in 8 program areas. We have so many grants because some of them have overlapping years, and that's why we have so many different grants operating at the same time. Our budget consists of about 85% of that are federal and state grants. So we are pretty much primarily reliant on federal and state funding for us to serve the community. You will notice that in our FY 2021 proposed budget, we are looking at an increase in grant funding of $3.4 million. Those funds, if you have your binder with you, there's an executive summary. It is sort of illustrates what makes up the $3.4 million in increased grant funding. Most of those funds are in response to the COVID-19. So it's as a result of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Just to highlight a few of those, we did get some additional funding from the federal government for the Community Services Block Grant. And for RPC, that represents about $940,903. We also received some additional funding for our energy assistance program, which is our LAHI program, and that's about $776,000. There were some other funds that we also did receive from the state. To highlight some of our transportation funding that we also received that will be part of our 2021 budget. There's funding we received from the Department of Transportation to do the Florida Avenue corridor study. We also received some additional funding for our land use inventory, which is about $405,000. And then another federal program that we received additional funding for is our Head Start and Early Head Start program, where we serve children from birth to 5 years old. So one of the things to note with the CARES funding is that most of these funds will be sunsetting in 2021. So these do not represent a permanent increase to the RPC's budget, but would allow us to serve the community in these next coming months. One of the things that we're also very proud of at the RPC is the fact that our administrative costs are less than 7.5% of the agency's budget. This is way below what the states would, allows us to charge for admin, as well as what the federal government allows us to charge for admin. Some organizations go up to 18% in charging the administrative costs. Here at the RPC, we keep those down to about 7.5%. One of the other things I also want to highlight that's part of our overall budget is the funding. So I talked about the 85% funding that we receive from the feds as well as from the state. We also do get funding from Champaign County to provide services in various areas. And if you do have your binder, I will point you to page Roman numeral 9 and 10, and particularly Roman numeral 10, where we outline the various areas where the county is providing support to the work that the RPC does on behalf of the community. Real quickly, we have membership services, which is about $20,903. This is a modest increase from last year. It's about a 1% increase. We're also looking at about $33,545, which is funding that goes to our transportation department. This is funding that comes out of the highway, county highway department. That's an increase of about 5%, totaling $33,545. One of the other key programs that we operate here at the RPC is the Youth Assessment Center, and that's with funding from the court diversion public safety tax. And that funding actually has decreased by 12%, but it totals about $213,000. I won't go through all of them, but the funds from the county, from the various departments, county highway, sheriff's office, and so forth, totals about $354,009 into our overall budget. Moving on to the next slide to go into the specific areas of our 5 funds, starting off with our general operating fund, which is Fund 075. We are projecting revenues of $16,744,559 with expenditures of about $15 million. This represents a full-time equivalency of 108 with a restricted fund balance of $1,964,757. This fund balance does have within it some of our grants. There are grants that we are compensated after we've incurred expenses. There are also some other grants that we get paid in advance. And so, and then, so the $1.9 million consists of a combination of factors, but it allows us to cash flow the organization. We are projecting a sustained growth potential in FY21. I'm a little bit cautiously optimistic. We've had these discussions on staff, given that the $3.4 million that are highlighted at the beginning of this presentation have to do with our response to this pandemic. And I'm reminded of when organizations like the RPC were part of the response in 2009 with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And there was quite a bit of resources that were appropriated by Congress to various programs that are operated by the RPC and like-minded organizations. But then those funds were significantly reduced in subsequent years. And so we are sort of projecting a sustained growth, but we are, as you know, we are pretty aggressive in trying to go for funding that allows us to meet the needs of our community. But this fund includes regional initiatives for transportation. It includes our community services. It includes funding that we receive from the state to provide services in the developmental, with developmental disabilities. It also helps us to implement our energy efficiency strategies. The staffing increases that we're projecting in this fund are proportionate to the grant funding and what we have as our planned outcomes for FY 2021. And again, our administrative expenses represent about 7.5%. Moving on to Fund 104, which is our early childhood fund. In this fund, we're projecting revenues of $12 million, $144,550, with expenditures of $12,634,550. This represents a full-time equivalency of 184, with a restricted fund balance of $1,126,604. That fund balance is also made up of, there are programs that were funded through the state of Illinois where we get subsidies as well as reimbursements. And that allows us to provide and afford quality services by having 3 staff in the classroom. But it also, this fund balance does have some funding that would allow us to deal with any unfunded liabilities. So let's say that we end up losing the Head Start program and we have vacations that have been accrued by staff, we need to have the ability to be able to pay that. And so part of this fund balance includes that unfunded liability that we have in the Head Start program. But it also includes some funds that we need to set aside for facility improvements. We do have center-based programming in 5 different areas. And so we always try to reserve some resources for us to be able to do any facility improvements. In FY21, we're also anticipating a modified approach to our programming where it will be a hybrid of providing center-based programming to our children, as well as providing virtual learning as we still try to deal with this COVID-19 pandemic. Moving on to Fund 110. Fund 110 represents our Workforce Development Fund. In this fund, we're anticipating revenues of $3,745,582 with expenses of $3,731,882. It does include a full-time equivalency of 63. You will notice that given the size of this program, we have a very small restricted fund balance. That is as a result of timing in how the state reimburses us for the expenses. We usually do make it up, but the state, for some reason, is delayed in reimbursing us for our expenses in this program. This has been typical, I think, in most of the years that the RTC has been operating the workforce. But just to highlight some additional things, the Fund 110 includes an increase in funding of about $1.2 million. This is an increase to our formula grant. As you recall, some of you that were on the county board a year or so ago, we did add an additional county. Previously, the regional planning was serving 4 counties, which are Champaign, Piatt, Iroquois, and Ford, and we added Douglas County as the 5th county in our service area. But in this fund, it will include an advancement of an interactive data portal. We have been involved in a 2-year innovative research program that was funded by the state of Illinois for us to better understand the needs of our employers in our 5-county area, as well as what we have available in terms of employees, and then trying to determine what are the future needs, present needs of our employers in this 5-county area, and how our workforce program can help our employers to meet those demands. Moving on to Fund 475, this is our Economic Development Fund. In this fund, we're looking at revenues of $838,500 with expenses of $501,000. The restricted fund balance in Fund 475 is $7,717,916. This just to explain a little bit about what is within this fund balance. This includes, most of it includes loan receivables. So these are loans that we're still getting paid on. It also includes payoffs. And then one of the other critical items that is within that fund balance is about $1.7 million we used to operate the Community Services Block Grant Revolving Loan Fund, which the federal government, this was not just RPC, it was statewide. And the federal government in 2014 asked the state of Illinois to essentially stop the program as they had some statutory questions related to it. And so since 2014, we have not been able to make any new loans, and we are holding the recaptured funds that we've recaptured from businesses that we made loans to, but we're not, so those funds may end up getting paid back to the federal government. It all depends on what gets worked out between the state of Illinois and the federal government. And so that's what consists of that $7.7 million in the restricted fund balance. But it does accommodate our restricted commercial revolving loan portfolio with a proportionate job creation. And then with these uncertain economic conditions that we've been experiencing, we are anticipating a limited loan demand, which is associated with business development. The fund, next fund that I want to highlight is Fund 474. This is our United States Department of Agriculture loan fund. The revenues in this fund are $15,000 and with expenses of $42,000 and with a restricted fund balance of $835,293. This represents our IRP, which is the Intermediary Revolving Loan Program. This is a program that allows us to provide low interest loans in rural areas with a population of less than 25,000. I want to highlight one of the exciting partnerships that we had this year. There's a community in our county, the village of Royal, that had had some issues with their downtown sewer system, which prevented, I think, businesses from being able to operate in that downtown area. I know that I was involved with one of the community leaders from the village of Royal with our Champaign County First group in trying to get resources both at the state level with the Capital Fund, as well as when we went to Washington, D.C. to meet with our members of Congress. We're happy that we made a loan to the village of Royal, and as a result, one of the initiatives that they have done with their sewer system is one of the first in the state of Illinois. And so we're proud that we have been a small part of helping that community be able to address that issue and hopefully be able to attract businesses in their downtown area. This fund includes an estimated disbursement of about $150,000 in new loan activity in FY 2021. Betty, I don't know if I've left anything critical within the budget itself.
I think you've covered it well. Thank you. I think the point on this that Delizzo mentioned is that this budget is based on a lot of uncertainty in FY 2021. As Delizzo mentioned, there's $3.4 million in new grant funding in this budget, of which 2.4 is the CARES Act funding. And you know, everyone's assuming there may be another stimulus program, and because we serve so many low-income, high-risk clients, we're hopeful that there is additional funding because that area of the population is who we target most of our programs towards. So, but this is a conservative budget and there's lots of uncertainty because of the COVID shutdown. So I think we're operating here with the best information that we have in terms of funding that we think we'll be able to receive in 2021.
Okay, are there questions for any of the RPC funds? Mr. Storr.
Good evening, Dr. Sulamoyo and Ms. Murphy. This is Chris Stewart. I'm looking on, wanting to talk about this last item that you had here. Of that $150,000, does that mean that there's about, almost $700,000 available in that restricted fund balance for loans?
Yes, that's correct. This program is funded by the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and actually we can apply at any time for additional intermediary revolving loan program funds. We just have to exhaust the funds that we have on hand. The issue with this is that it is restricted to rural areas with a population of less than 25,000, and there has to be private match. So the municipal government has to provide some funding toward this, but it's an incredible opportunity for our rural communities to improve their infrastructure. And we are absolutely able to secure more funding if there's increased demand.
Chris, you're muted.
I just wanted to say thank you, and I have no further questions. You've done a fine job of explaining everything that I had a question for.
Okay, any questions from any other board member? Okay, thanks for coming this evening. I think we're going to go on, Tammy, now with animal control. So we're going to switch the share screen.
Oh, oops. Well, hold on one moment. Okay, it's not wanting to select the correct screen. I'm assuming you're seeing my desktop screen, correct?
No,
We
we've
can
got the
see
slideshow
animal
now.
control. We can see animal control.
Oh, you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so our first budget for this evening is animal control. And this fund actually has 3 budgets, so I will consolidate them into this slide. If you remember, the county board approved increases in registration fees earlier this year, and that will help to generate additional revenue for our animal control fund that will allow this fund to make future software and capital needs purchases. One piece of equipment that was purchased in this fiscal year was a new van for animal control. There's also a planned software purchase in fiscal year 2022, which will replace the in-house software on the AS400. I know that during the last legislative budget hearings, we talked about planning for replacement in fiscal year 2021, but we are going to push that off another year. I know that Ms. Joes has had some meetings with Tyler. They have animal licensing modules available at this time, however, not kennel management. And I know that there are some other software providers that she has researched, but this will give her a little bit more time to determine which direction to go on that so that we can move forward with that in 2022. There are also some capital needs at her facility that are going to need to be addressed in the next few years, and one of those things is the cages, which are going to need either improvements or replacement in the next few years. Darlene, that's the information I have for that
Okay.
budget. If there are
Are there
questions.
any, are there any questions about animal control? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Thanks.
The next budget is the Children's Advocacy Center. This budget reflects increases in grants for VOCA and DCFS for fiscal year 2021. This fund also receives funding from the Mental Health Board as well as donations. And the increase in funding will be allocated to professional services appropriation to pay for counseling services for abuse victims, as well as personnel cost increases.
Okay, any questions for Carrie? Okay, moving on.
The County Highway Fund was one of the levy funds that was impacted by the Carl Foundation ruling this fiscal year, and the payment that was extended from County Highway was approximately $115,000. For fiscal year 2021, this budget reflects appropriation for heavy equipment, also a transfer to the Highway Building Capital Department in the amount of $112,000. And just to note, the fund balance that's reflected here includes the reserve for the Highway Building Capital budget, which at the end of fiscal year 2021, that balance would be $314,072. If the $100,000 that's appropriated is spent, there's not a plan for that appropriation right now, but it's there in the event that there are emergency repairs needed for highway facilities. If that appropriation is not spent, then the portion of that fund balance associated with building the capital reserve would be $414,000. One of the large capital expenditures on the county's 10-year capital plan for highway is a scheduled roof replacement in fiscal year 2029. There are no major road improvements scheduled to be paid from this fund in 2021. Again, the highway building capital budget reflects a transfer from the highway budget. As I stated, there's $100,000 appropriated in the event that there are emergency needs, but there are no major projects scheduled in 2021. And this fund balance will just continue to build in order to accommodate future capital projects for the highway department. The County Bridge Fund is the next highway fund. Per Mr. Blue, there are 6 major bridge projects scheduled for 2021. Those are listed here. I won't read those. And there are 8 to 10 smaller county and township projects that are scheduled in fiscal year 2021. For the County Motor Fuel Tax Fund, as you know, there was an increase in the motor fuel tax in 2019. However, motor fuel tax revenues are down due to COVID-19 and people traveling less. So whereas you can see the original budget for motor fuel tax revenues for 2020 was at 4.4 million, projected for 2020 is actually only 2.6 million, with a 2021 budget reflecting anticipated motor fuel tax revenues of 3.2 million. This budget includes $1 million as a contingency if the rebuild grant does not come through. And we'll talk about that grant a little bit later. There's also $1 million in road and bridge maintenance appropriated for fiscal year 2021. Highway Federal Aid Matching Fund has an appropriation of $25,000 to cover the local match for a federal safety grant to develop a systematic safety evaluation tool for rural roadways. I'm sorry, systemic safety evaluation tool. And the last budget for highway is actually a new fund created, and this is for the IDOT Rebuild Grant. And expenditures must be for capital transportation projects with a minimum of 13-year life. Anticipated revenues over a 3-year period are just under $5.8 million. And appropriation for 2021 reflects a budget for the Sydney Road rebuild and the Flatville Bridge rehab.
Okay, any questions about the highway budget? Mr. Storr.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Kleppel. Mr. Blue, I was looking through the budget. Is this a year in which the pavement analysis is done, or is that done annually or every few years?
It's done every other year. They take the vehicles out and actually do the pavement analysis, but on the years where they don't do that, they do some prediction models to predict the deterioration or the betterment of the pavement based on our projects that we're doing and the maintenance that we're doing on the roads.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so thank you, Jeff. We can move along. Tammy?
The next budget is Mental Health Board. And this was also a fund that was affected by the Carl Foundation ruling in this fiscal year at a cost of $214,000. The community needs assessment and 3-year plan are to be developed in partnership with other organizations which have a similar responsibility and mission. Mental health first aid trainings were expanded to include a teen module. And due to COVID-19, services provided by agencies under contract with the board may be modified to ensure best outcomes for people served by the agency as the demand for services increase and most are considered essential. One thing that I will refer you to is the link in the narrative that provides information that was put together by Ms. Canfield regarding a list of funded programs and agencies. So if you click on that link, you will be able to navigate and see specifically exactly what agencies are being funded by the Mental Health Board at what level, and also funded by the Developmental Disabilities Board, which is our next budget. The Carl Foundation ruling impact to this budget in 2020 was approximately $177,000. The same notes here as I mentioned on the Mental Health Board about the community needs assessment and the service provision related to the COVID-19 impact. The Developmental Disabilities Board will continue to improve access to information about all resources, especially while in-person resource fairs and events cannot be held. And within this budget is a $404,000 appropriation that is an administrative cost share between the boards. So this budget actually, or this fund actually contributes to the administrative cost in the Mental Health Board fund at this $404,000 level in fiscal year 2021. Additionally, there is a transfer budgeted in the amount of $50,000 to the Cilla fund. And the last budget for the Mental Health Board is the Mental Health Board Developmental Disabilities Board Cilla Facilities Fund. This budget reflects the day program options available to residents of the Cillas, which may be modified to ensure their greatest but safest community involvement and independence. And the Mental Health Board and DD Board may be considering options available to those boards, such as purchasing another house, selling the current houses, or revising the related agreements, also possibly in response to changes related to COVID. There are appropriations included in 2021 for increased insurance costs for additional liability coverage for the Cilla facilities.
Okay, any questions for the Mental Health Board, Developmental Disabilities Board budgets? Okay, seeing none. Thanks, Lynn. We can move on, Tammy.
The Board of Health budget is the next budget. The Carl Foundation ruling impact to this fund was $55,000 in 2020. In fiscal year 2020, there is a significant amount of grant funding for COVID-19 related expenses. The County Board approved budget amendments for those grants earlier this year. There is also appropriation in 2021 for grant funding specifically for contact tracing. The 2021 budget reflects a revenue to expenditure deficit of $41,000. And what makes up that deficit is an appropriation for emergency funding, if necessary, of $15,000. In order for that appropriation to be utilized, those expenditures must be authorized by the chair of the Board of Health. Also, the 2021 budget reflects an increase in the Smile Healthy program appropriation, which has historically been budgeted at $45,000, however, is budgeted at $50,000 in fiscal year 2021. And additionally, the Board of Health anticipates that at a future meeting, it may approve a 25% reduction in food establishment health permit fees, and that is associated with the time that bars and restaurants were closed for dining per the state's executive order. So again, the impact of that reduction in fees, I'm sorry, I didn't write that down here. I think it was around $21,000.
It was, hi, Tammy.
Hello.
It was $21,375 and it was approved at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and are there any other questions for Krista from the Board of Health? And I think Dr. Peterson is here this evening as well.
Yes, I am. I was muted by the chair or something like that.
Okay.
I've explained to the county board, this is an incredibly complicated budget this time with the Carl thing, and then a lot of very big grants came in, a $60,000 grant. We have not needed to dip into the carryover that you gave us the ability to do several months ago because of the grant money that came from the state and federal government. We do anticipate that those grant funds will be spent on COVID activities.
Ms. Furtado, do you have a question?
I do have a question, sort of based on that statement, that you have. That you haven't had to dip into that reserve. So would that money then be returned to the fund balance? Because I guess I'm not sort of seeing that on page 50. Or what would if you don't spend that money? I don't know if that's a question for Tammy or for whoever. Does that money go back to the fund balance?
Yeah, it actually hasn't been taken from fund balance. It's been appropriated, but there's not been a draw on it.
Okay, that makes sense. That's why there's no difference except the 15
Right.
that you explained. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like there are no further questions, so thank you for coming and we can move on.
The next fund is Gis Consortium, and this is made up of 3 separate budgets. Due to the economic hardship resulting from the pandemic, there was an effort to lower the membership increases. And so for 2021, those increases are 1.5% and will help cover increased personnel costs and the this fund's contribution for the ERP cost allocation. Capital purchases from this fund are based on a 5-year capital and technology plan, and in fiscal year 2021, appropriation per that plan is just under $72,000. Member agencies make an annual contribution, which is 1/3 of their share of the aerial photography cost, with the full expenditure budgeted in the 3rd year. And 2020 was that year. For 2021, there are no increases for ortho acquisition.
Okay, Mr. Story, you have a question.
Thank you. I ask, is the aerial photography that is required, that's being acquired, is that 3-band or 4-band aerial photography?
It's 4-band. It has all 4 of the bands.
Oh, joy, you lift my heart. And I saw that you made that there was a comment about increasing the point density for the LiDAR. What is that, please?
The point density will be 4 points per square meter.
Okay, that's an improvement over the 1 point. And lastly, I was kind of curious. Is there a plan or consideration for how to update maps and everything that has to do with vertical control or relies on vertical control to the 2022 datum that is anticipated?
We don't have any plans set in place yet, but I have reached out to Todd Horton, and he does plan to provide the agency all of that, and including the concern. He'll do a workshop for us needed. Did you hear me?
I got most of it,
yeah.
and I know Professor Todd Horton, and he certainly will recognize the importance of the getting good vertical control, as I'm sure many of our rural county board members will, because that has a big impact on their on the drainage ditches and leveling and making sure that they function as designed. Thank you, Executive Kleppel.
Okay, any other questions for the GIS Consortium? Stephanie?
Maybe you spoke to this and I just missed it. What is the difference in the 5337 line, the professional services line? What was the reason it was so high in 2020 compared to 2019 and 2021?
That was because of the orthophotography.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you, Tammy. We can move on.
The GIS Fund receives revenue from fees for documents filed and recorded, and allows the county to pay for its membership contribution to the GIS Consortium, including the orthophotography contribution, as well as some mapping software licenses for different county departments. As I stated earlier, the fee membership increase is 1.5%, and for 2021, and also in 2021, we will be drawing on fund balance in order to allow the county to purchase software and get additional assistance from GIS Consortium for redistricting following the 2020 census.
Okay, is that the last GIS slide, Tammy?
Yes.
Okay, does anybody feel a need? Do you want to take a break? I guess it's you really primarily. Do you feel like we can continue on?
I'm good, and actually the rest of the budgets will be presented by me, so we're not at risk of running ahead of schedule for anyone being late.
Okay, let's just move forward then. We're making pretty good progress tonight. Go ahead with the court's construction.
The Courts Construction Fund was created in 1999 as a capital project fund, and basically the county has been drawing on the fund balance ever since. When the funds are expended, the plan will be for this fund to be closed, which at this point looks like it will be at the end of 2021. In fiscal year 2020, the video security and surveillance system at the courthouse was budgeted. However, based on the results of the RFP, the cost for that project exceeded the amount that was budgeted. So, and also has to be paid from one fund because the project will be capitalized. So the plan for the amount that was appropriated in 2020 for this project will be actually to transfer those funds to the Capital Asset Replacement Fund and combine them with the Capital Asset Replacement Fund dollars in order to complete this project in 2020, this fiscal year. The remaining balance of this fund is then budgeted for fiscal year 2021 to be used as needed for capital costs.
Okay, any questions about this fund? Seeing none. Let's go to Courthouse Museum.
The Courthouse Museum Fund is established to maintain a museum area with a focus on Abraham Lincoln in the courthouse, and decisions regarding projects to be funded are made by the Lincoln Legacy Committee. There is no specific expenditures that are budgeted for fiscal year 2021, although there is a budgeted fund balance of $9,000 available.
Okay, I would like to just add here that they've made some changes. Eric, do you have a question, or did you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think that you were about to say one part. They've changed the bylaws, even though we haven't met this year. I think they worked with you on that. There are plans to do things, but all of them, of course, are going to be put on hold due to the COVID. So they plan to start meeting again in 2021. They've not been adapting to the Zoom, so they just haven't held meetings, mostly just email conversations, but they are still functioning on some level.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Tammy, go ahead.
The next fund is the county's public safety sales tax fund. The state's 1.5% collection fee for this fund is still in effect. Just for your information, the cost to the county so far year to date has been $246,000. For fiscal year 2020, at this point in the year, the projected decline in sales tax revenue is 13% compared to the 2020 original budget. Fiscal year 2021 is conservatively budgeted due to the unknown ongoing impact of the pandemic. And I talk about here a $400,000 pledge that was made back in 2006 towards the clock and bell tower restoration project. The state's attorney's office, Barb Mann in particular, has been working with different parties that were involved in this original pledge, and actually received a phone call from her this afternoon saying that she believes that they have worked out all of the kinks and is very optimistic that the county will be receiving this $400,000 soon. It's not in the 2020 budget, it's not in the 2021 budget, but we are anticipating that this $400,000 check, like I said, which is really good news because this had just been fallen by the wayside and was not believed initially that it was actually owed to the county. However, thanks to Barb's hard work on this, it looks like we are going to be able to receive this revenue. So some of the expenditure highlights for public safety sales tax. 54% of tax revenue is budgeted to pay for debt service in 2021. And actually, I've got a slide here that shows what the debt service payments are for the remaining the remainder of the 3 issues that the county has. And over here, so in 2022, you can see a slight drop in the payments between 2022 and 2023. This is when the 1999 issue matures. However, also in 2023, the 2014 issue, the principal kicks in. So there's very little relief there. In 2026, the 2016 issue matures. So again, in 2027, you can see a slight drop in the county's debt service payments. And then in 2028, the 2014 issue matures, and unless the county issues new debt, we'll no longer have public safety sales tax debt service. Sorry. Programs that are funded from Public Safety Sales Tax Fund include the Youth Assessment Center, and the level of funding is based on 5% of the prior year's public safety sales tax revenues. So I know earlier in the presentation, RPC referenced the decrease in funding for fiscal year 2021. That decrease is based on the projected 5% revenues for public safety sales tax in 2020. One thing I will point out is that there is a set aside, I can't remember, I know it's around $60,000 in public safety sales tax funds that can be used for, you know, one-time costs that are identified as a need. I know we used this back in, I believe, 2018, maybe 2019, when the Youth Assessment Center moved. So we tapped into this a little bit to cover some of their relocation costs. So this is something that potentially could be an option to make up the difference between the $213,000 that is projected based on 5% of 2020 revenues versus the prior couple of years level of funding, which was around $242,000. The reentry contract, which ends at the end of 2020, is actually included in this budget. There is $100,000 appropriation in the event that the county board should extend that contract or determine to utilize those funds for other purposes. And the jail classification lieutenants' salary and wages are also paid from this fund through a transfer, as well as some of the public safety buildings, utilities, and minor maintenance cost, and some public safety expenditures. Also a portion of the JANO Justice System technology, and some of the capital cost of public safety offices, such as software, equipment, and computers. One thing we talked about last night when we talked about the Specialty Courts Fund was that we would no longer be transferring funds from public safety sales tax to that fund, at least for the short term, because AOIC is now covering funding for the salary of that position. Darlene,
Mr. Patterson, do you have a question?
Yeah, it says in our packets, current Rosecrans reentry contract is effective from July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. Is that accurate?
Okay. What page? Oh, I see that. No, that's not accurate.
Okay.
That should be December 31st of 2020.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so I guess then, we've budgeted 50,000. Will be budgeted for 2021?
No, the full 100,000 is budgeted.
Okay, so we will have the money budgeted for that for.
Yes, the appropriations available should this contract be extended, or or the county board chooses to use it for other purposes. And
I wanted to ask, so it looks like the motor fuel tax, the decline, just by my math, is about 40% of what was anticipated. but the for the public safety sales tax, the decline was only 13%. Does that have to do with something to do with state share, or is that just reflective that people aren't traveling but they're still buying stuff?
Well, I don't do the projections for revenues for motor fuel tax, but that is, you know, similar in that it is a sales tax. Public safety sales tax obviously is related to direct purchases. And my numbers with a negative 13% decline are based on the most current receipts that the county has. And looking forward through the end of 2020, just seeing, you know, where that we might end up if there is improvement between now and the end of the year. I can't really compare them to motor fuel tax revenues.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Ms. Furtado, did you have a question?
I did. Tammy, the 60,000 set aside that you were talking about that we used a few years back to help with the move, and you said could possibly offset, is that part of the 57180 fund that we just send to General Corp?
No, it's just part of the fund balance.
Oh, okay. I guess that's what my question was. So like, it's just part of the fund balance, so it would take specific action by the board after the budget in order to do that?
No, basically, if there was direction given for the county to utilize that set aside in order to make YAC funding whole for 2021, then that level of appropriation for YAC would just be brought up to.
Okay.
And then it would in effect be a draw on fund balance.
Can I ask you a question, a follow-up question? Do you know what is the exact dollar amount that, I mean, I know this is all projections, but.
Exact dollar amount of?
I mean, would the 60,000 make it totally whole, or would you need the exact?
Oh, no, we would need less than that.
Okay.
I think, I believe
it's about a 30,000, a little bit about 30,000 difference.
Okay, so I guess I'm just speaking again just for me. We haven't obviously discussed this in my caucus because I just learned about this, but I would like to see that 30,000 brought forward in the budget process rather than a later thing. That's just my opinion, but I would prefer that we keep YAC whole, especially if we have the money and that's set aside.
Okay.
Mr. McGuire, did you have a question? Mr. McGuire, if you're talking, you're muted. Mr. McGuire, I see your hand raised. Are you talking? You're muted if you're talking?
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I was going to ask the same question Stephanie did. And I would agree with Stephanie that we would try to make Youth Assessment Center whole with the budget.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the public safety sales tax? Okay, then we can move on, Tammy.
For the capital asset replacement fund, funding is predominantly interfund transfers with the exception of interest. And this is the fund where the county pays for the majority of its software, its technology, its ERP is budgeted in this fund for 2021, and also includes a cost allocation to come back to the county from non-general corporate fund departments. The ERP cost will be substantially lower in 2022. They're closer to around $200,000 annually. However, for 2021, as you know, we have implementation cost and data conversion cost, as well as the software costs.
Okay, Mr. Goss. I'm sorry. Did you have another slide on this one, Tammy?
Well, yeah, just the expenditure slide. For fiscal year 2021, the facility appropriation is $1.57 million, plus there is a remaining balance of about $220,000 that was initially budgeted for ADA improvements at the downtown sheriff's facility and not used for those purposes, but has been used since for some public safety planning purposes. So this is the remaining amount of that balance. For appropriation in 2021, the Capital Asset Replacement Fund includes some of the things I mentioned earlier, also Microsoft licensing, security, operations center, DevNet, JMS, softcode, Chronos, and also backup services, as well as ERP implementation, conversion, and software, and technology and equipment that is scheduled for replacement in 2021. One thing to note is that the nursing home fund owes the Capital Asset Replacement Fund a little over $600,000 for projects that were paid for from the Capital Asset Replacement Fund in prior fiscal years.
Okay, Mr. Goss.
Thank you. Tammy, so is it 533.29 that is the software?
Yes.
That 1.52 million or
1.45 million.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
It's actually, let me clarify. This is cloud-based software. There's still some software that is paid out of a different line, but very minimal software.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Storr.
Thank you. I was curious, is there any money being set aside or allocated for replacement of the JANO or the near obsolete JANO software that's on the AS400?
There is not. That is something that the county, let me just talk about that a little bit. When this fund was initially established, the intent of the fund was for there to be reserve funding set aside year after year, so that when it was a year for scheduled replacement or purchase, that there would be full funding for that item. So, and I wasn't here all those years ago, but at some point in time, county revenues were just not able to sustain full funding. And so current only funding basically was put into place. And what that means is that, we are still drawing on some reserves, but essentially for the most part are funding most things with just current revenues within the fiscal year. The one exception since I have been here was in 2019. We were able to provide additional funding for capital asset replacement reserves in 2019.
Ms. Furtado, did you have something else? You're muted, Stephanie.
In the budget replacement, I have a question. In the budget sort of projection, Darlene, when you gave us that final slide of your state of the county and you had projected, one of the things that it was basically we're going to slow roll some of the CARF projects, and it seemed like the projection was steeper than the decline that I'm seeing on here. Is that accurate? Is this a better picture or more rosy picture than was projected on that slide? Because it was pretty steep.
Yes. Yeah, this is a better picture. So what you're seeing and what Tammy's presenting tonight is, and Yelton last night, are budgets. We originally thought we would have to take a 4% cut from all the departments. We asked them to do that, thinking that it would be, going to be pretty severe. As we've gone through the last couple of months, every month that we go through, Tammy reassesses where we're at with revenues in terms of each of these specific funds that are bringing in money in various ways, and which we have the couple of things that have made a big difference, one has been the state reimbursement, which we were not necessarily expecting, for the 1.3 million to reimburse for COVID expenses, which really hit our budgets hard this year. And then we're just taking a look at what we think the impacts will be on some other budgets. I know the cities are also planning huge cuts for next year. Ours, we have not made quite as deep as they are. They're looking at 20% in some cases. And we've tried to really be as, we're still being conservative, I think, but it is not as steep as we anticipated back a couple months ago.
Because I thought like the CARF was like 40% or something, or like half or something.
Yeah,
And
it was 50%.
Okay, so we're not in that position. I do think that like maybe at some point next year, like maybe halfway through next year or something, just if we could come back to this just to understand. I know we were really proud in 2019 when we finally got to the place where we were funding our CARF, you know, somewhat appropriately. So if we could just like maybe circle back to this to just have a discussion in the board about what the impacts of COVID and the down revenues have been on our 10-year sort of capital asset replacement. You know, is there a year down the road that we're going to need to balloon this up in order to get back to a 10-year plan? You know what I mean? I mean, I know we're only deferring, we're not as deferring as much as we were, but
well, we're still deferring. So the facilities, for example, the facilities 10-year plan will still have to make some adjustments with.
Right. And I know that all 10-year plans always have adjustments, but just maybe if we could get like an update about maybe like through the facilities committee or something.
Sure.
And have it come to the board, I'd be really interested in that. Thanks.
Mr. Storr, did you have another question?
Yes, thank you. Just to amplify a bit about what Stephanie was discussing, I looked at the 10-year plan this afternoon, and I noticed that we have some very large items that are coming down the pike, including the demolition of the old nursing home and the anticipated closure of the downtown jail, and likely demolition of that building as well. And I agree with Stephanie that I'd like to see further discussion so that we can more actively and certainly devise plans to meet these obligations. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions about this fund? Seeing none, Tammy, you can move on.
The next fund is Imrf Fund, which was impacted by the Carl Foundation ruling. The impact to fund balance was about $113,000 this year. Good news is that Imrf rates are slightly decreasing in fiscal year 2021. You can see those decreases on the slide. The ECHO contribution, I think, went down about $11,000. It was around $190,000 in fiscal year 2020. And the nursing home fund, even though a portion of the levy was reallocated in 2019, the former nursing home operating levy was reallocated in 2019, there is still an outstanding balance owed from the nursing home fund to Imrf in the amount of $182,643.
Okay, questions on this fund? Mr. Goss?
Yeah, Tammy, I assume we can go back and capture that at some point in the future.
Yes, that through continued reallocation of the levy.
Okay, thank you.
You will see later in the nursing home fund budget, there is a transfer to some of the county funds that if there are available fund balance remaining, that we potentially could make some funds whole through that. Nursing home fund balance.
Ms. Furtado, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to sort of dovetail off of Jim's question. Tammy, to which funds do you anticipate directing the 2021 levy to?
Just the general fund.
Just the general fund? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you can move on, Tammy.
The Social Security Fund paid $93,000 in 2020 for the Carl Foundation ruling. The FICA rate remains stable at 7.65%, and increased appropriation in this fund just reflects increases in wages. The balance owed from the nursing home fund to this fund is a little over $232,000. Again, a portion of the former nursing home operating levy was reallocated in 2019 towards this fund, but did not fully cover the obligation.
Any questions on this one? Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, thank you. Move on, Tammy.
Okay, tort immunity tax is where the general fund's workers' comp, unemployment insurance, and the general fund share of the premiums and claims to self-funded insurance are paid. The Carl Foundation ruling impact to this fund in 2020 was $107,000. This fund, as you can see, has a negative fund balance. It has for many years due to the fact that the property tax levy cannot keep up with increasing expenditures within this fund. In 2020, the former nursing home levy was reallocated fully to this fund for amounts that were owed from the nursing home fund to self-funded insurance. Self-funded insurance is not a levy fund, and so tort immunity tax basically was where that levy was reallocated and then budgeted as a transfer to self-funded insurance. Even with that transfer that is planned at the end of 2020, there is still an outstanding balance owed to Tort Immunity Fund. I believe at this point, after that transfer is made, is approximately $850,000, although the county still continues to incur costs, so that number is continually growing. In fiscal year 2021, the budget includes increases for general insurance costs, as well as anticipated increases for law enforcement liability. So, and also increased coverage for cyber liability. So if you're looking at this budget and you're saying, well, in all actuality, the 2021 expenditures are lower than 2020, you have to remember that 2020 included the $1.3 million that's basically just a pass-through in order to get that money over to self-funded insurance. So tort immunity tax is in a combined account with self-funded insurance, and that's why you know, we are able to continue to operate the account, because as you noted, there was a negative fund balance of 1.25 million in the one fund. So that negative is offset by the surplus in self-funded insurance, which has a fund balance of just under $5 million. The combination of the negative and the surplus is $3.7 million. And at the end of 2021, the actuarial recommendation for the county was $3.1 million. However, I just want to repeat again that there are still outstanding nursing home claims that have not been settled. So for self-funded insurance, this is revenue from the Tort Immunity Fund and billings to other county funds to cover auto, property, liability, unemployment and workers' compensation claims, and also the county's stop-loss premiums. I did mention earlier that the reallocation of the former nursing home levy in 2020 will partially make self-funded insurance whole, but not fully. A couple of recent things. We just actually had a meeting today to talk about a budget amendment that's going to be forthcoming for self-funded insurance, and that will be to cover the county's costs for hailstorm damages to vehicles and county buildings. We had about 30 vehicles that sustained hail damage and 12, possibly more buildings that sustained hail damage. So I'm just letting you know that those were not costs initially anticipated at the time the 2020 budget was prepared, and we will be bringing a budget amendment to cover those additional costs that the county is expecting in 2020. Also, in conjunction with that, again, still very new, we just had an initial meeting today. We have another meeting tomorrow to talk about insurance amounts that are being extended to the county for the insurance portion of those damages. So I think at this point, what we will be doing is probably adding another department to self-funded insurance in order to reflect the receipt of those revenues for the insurance claims. And predominantly, the majority of the work that will be done for those building repairs will be done in 2021. So we will want to make sure that the budget includes appropriation for that work to be done. So again, an addition is anticipated for 2021 budget to add a new department to self-funded insurance for the receipt of revenues and extension of those dollars for the facility repairs that will need to be done.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions for this one. So go ahead, Tammy.
Okay, the last budget of the night is the nursing home fund. And we talked about this last night. The $1 million loan that is on the balance sheet is recommended to be written off. And so the general fund would be made whole through reallocation of the former nursing home operating levy. In order for this loan to be written off, this would require the board to pass a resolution in 2021 that essentially forgives the loan, which would record it as a transfer in the county's books. The auditor's office wrote off a substantial amount of outstanding AR at the end of 2019. And the county received in 2020 the first release of 1/3 of the escrow holdback, which was $110,000. The second release of the $110,000 is budgeted in 2021. Our post-closure accounting firm is still in the process of issuing refunds for overpayments made to the nursing home fund. Those are anticipated to be complete by the end of 2020, but could be as much as $400,000. Year to date, we have processed about $62,000 in refunds. And for fiscal year 2021, any remaining available funds at the end of the year are appropriated as transfers to go towards other funds for outstanding balances that are owed to those funds. I don't really know what that's going to look like until obviously we get through the refunds process, but wanted to go ahead and put that appropriation in there in the event that there was capacity for the nursing home fund to be able to make progress towards making some of the county funds whole. And we will have some minor ongoing operational expenditures in 2020. One of those you can see is budgeted in 53329 for computer infotech services, and that is for the county's matrix care system, which is how the post-closure accounting firm is able to track the refunds that are owed. I think probably we are going to be able to move this down to a maintenance mode. This $66,000 represents the full mode, but the hope is that once we get all the refunds processed, we'll be able to move that down to a lower cost maintenance mode. I've also appropriated $12,000 for professional services in the event that we still need to engage the services of our post-closure accounting firm.
Okay, any last questions for the evening? All right, we made it through tonight in good time. Thank you all for coming, and seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you,
Thank
Darlene.
you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Darlene.
Thank you, Champaign County people.
Darlene.
Yep.
This is Cynthia Fears. I've been on the call. I missed the roll call. I've been on the call since 6:06.
I got you, Cynthia. We got you when you logged on.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.